I'm going to play you a short clip of that 5-year-old president of Burkina Faso who has gained a lot of fans from across the continent, the African continent, because of his latest remarks and Pan-African speeches. Now, remember, not long ago, this same president was a junior officer in the Burkinabe army, and today he's the president of Burkina Faso. The reason is because previous leaders betrayed Burkina Faso and sold it to France or to French interests. Now, I'm going to play you the video first.
Les questions que mes générations se posent sont les suivantes, si je peux me résumer. C'est de ne pas comprendre comment l'Afrique, avec tant de richesses sur notre sol, avec une nature généreuse, de l'eau, du soleil en abondance, l'Afrique est aujourd'hui le continent le plus pauvre. L'Afrique est un continent affamé. Et comment se fait-il que les chefs d'État traversent donc le monde à mendier? Voici des questions que nous nous posons et que nous n'avons pas de réponse jusque-là. Nous avons l'occasion de tisser de nouvelles relations. Et j'espère que ces relations puissent être les meilleures pour donner un meilleur avenir à nos peuples. Pour ce qui concerne le Burkina Faso, aujourd'hui nous sommes confrontés depuis plus de 8 ans à la forme de manifestation la plus barbare, la plus violente du néocolonialisme, de l'impérialisme. L'esclavage qu'on tend encore à nous imposer.
His name is Ibrahim Traore, and he has won a lot of admiration from across the African continent and beyond because to many people he reminds them of Thomas Sankara, the famous Thomas Sankara, who was a revolutionary leader in the same country, Burkina Faso. Now, this Ibrahim, not so long ago, as I said, was the captain of a small division, and rather a small battalion of soldiers in Burkina Faso, artillery beggary division. So they were in charge of this smaller artillery in the north of that country, fighting these Al-Qaeda jihadis. Now today he's the president, and turns out he's a very educated guy. He's self-conscious. One of the famous comment he made recently that has made headlines on Reddit, it's trending on Twitter, it's trending all over the place. It says that a slave that does not rebel does not deserve pity. The African Union, meaning the African continental body, must stop condemning Africans who decide to fight against their own puppet regimes of the West. So what he meant is most African, especially most former French colonies, have these presidents, and I made a video previously and tried to say the same thing, and I used the Cameroonian president as an example. So most countries have these long-serving dictators. Some of them, like now the Cameroonian, has been in power for 46 years, and he has never changed that country since 1968. So they have these leaders who are puppets of France and generally the West. And since these dictators and strongmen are friendly to these Western countries, they are never removed. Even when you try to remove them, France sends their own special forces to try to prop them and protect them from being deposed. This happened in Ivory Coast when they were not interested in Gbagbo and they wanted the current president Ouattara. So you saw what happened. They sent these mercenary French special forces who came in and removed that president. So that's what happens. They collect intelligence on any possible rebels or opposition, and they stop them before they can even make a move on these dictators. Now, in Burkina Faso and Mali and now countries like Guinea, they have been successful to remove these puppets or these presidents who are puppets of the West. And that's what he was saying in that tweet. And it's all over the place because a lot of Africans are able to relate with what he's saying. It's not something that you need to go to school to understand. It's just straightforward. And the other thing he said recently when he was in Russia, and he said it in French, but a lot of people are able to do the translation, is that African countries have suffered for decades from a barbaric and brutal form of colonialism and imperialism, which could be called a modern form of slavery. He stressed. However, a slave who does not fight for his freedom is not worthy any indulgence. And he went ahead to say that the heads of African states should not behave like puppets in the hands of the imperialists. We must ensure that our countries are self-sufficient, including as regards to food supply, and can meet all the needs of our own people or all of our people. He goes ahead to say that glory and respect to our people, victory to our people, homeland or death. Basically, that's more like a military salute or motto. So Traore summed up as he ended his speech, beautiful speech in Russia, in Moscow. And I can tell you, most countries apart from countries like Kenya, countries like Egypt, and to an extent countries like South Africa, have those ones I've mentioned, and even not Nigeria really, Ghana maybe, the army is well paid. So we can see those countries I've mentioned, a lot of young men join for the pay and the job. But in other African countries, you find like in Uganda, soldiers being paid about $60 a month. $60. In a country like Tanzania, they are paid $100 a month for a soldier. So the army doesn't have good pay, I know, and I suspect in Burkina Faso and Mali the pay is even lower. So imagine getting the monthly pay of what some soldiers get in 2 hours. In the United States, a soldier earns $50 in 2 hours. In now Mali or Burkina Faso, the same soldier earns that same amount in a month, in 30 days. So what I'm trying to say is that for a young man to join the army in those countries is because of patriotism. It can only be patriotism because they love their own country, not because they are there because of the job or the pay. So that's why now you find the most patriotic people in these poor African countries are definitely the soldiers. So I believe him. I believe Ibrahim Traore because I may suspect when he was in that artillery division, his pay per month was somewhere less than $100. So $100, it doesn't mean he was in the army because he loved the job or he wanted the money. He was there because of patriotism, to defend the country, Burkina Faso. So, and that's why you're seeing that sometimes they would be frustrated when the civilian leaders, now like the deposed president, went to meet the French president and they have these underhand dealings where you find that the civilian leaders have built mansions worth billions of money, and they're doing nothing to fight these jihadis. And in return, now you have a young man like him discovering that the country like Burkina Faso has resources, gold, uranium, and a lot of resources, but then they're still poor 70 years after independence. So that's why you find a lot of frustration among young people in Africa who are being paid $60 a month, yeah,